Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Overfilled, the podcast. This is a gratitude podcast where my besties and I, Dr. Jason Jedlicka and Dr. Jamie Kuzner, we like to talk about how much we enjoy what we do every day, mostly fitting specialty contact lenses, but there's a few other things that we enjoy as well, like our industry involvement and things like that. It's been a couple weeks since we've been able to connect because we've had busy summers like many of you have had as well, I'm sure. So we're excited to be back here connecting with each other today. And we're going to talk about how we utilize our team members in the clinic with us and how much we appreciate all that they do for us in providing for our patients. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about first what overfilled us in the last couple of weeks. And Jason, I know you just got back from a trip, so can you share with us your overfilled moments?
Sure. Yeah. So I have a son who's in the Army and is stationed in Monterey, California. Beautiful. And how could we let a year of his time there go by without visiting? And so, so we were out in Monterey last week. And obviously, the biggest overfill is getting to see him after 6 months away. But it was a good time. Had a couple of the kids with us and got to see some pretty beautiful sights, scenery, and particularly got to cool down from this hot summer. You guys are probably experiencing the same stuff, but it was like 90s here last week, but it was only in the 60s out there. So it was great time to cool down and see. And been to California a lot of times, but never been to Monterey area. So it was really neat. And again, got to catch up with the kid for a few days and had a good time. So
do you
that
get to spend like ample time while they're there, or like is it like do they have flexibility in their schedule to spend time with you?
Yeah, so he's in again the Defense Language Institute, so he's learning a foreign language. So he's not in like basic training or anything. So he has the ability to come and go as long as he's there on base for his classes he takes every day. So we were able to grab him for dinner one evening during the week, and then he actually stayed at our Verbo for the weekend.
Oh, how nice.
The whole time. So they have a lot more flexibility at this stage to come and go.
Yeah. What a amazing discipline too. Like you forget about all the complexities of the armed forces and like all the services that need to come together to, make the missions work and, provide the safety that they do. So
and this campus is huge. And I asked them, I said, do you guys do anything here other than foreign language? Like, nope, everybody here is just learning foreign languages. And there's literally hundreds and hundreds of armed forces people from all the branches out there that are just learning one of 20 different languages they teach.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed your trip.
It was good. Yep. Came back with a little bit of a cold, but that's what you get when you travel.
Yeah, I just got over a summer cold too. Jamie, you've had a busy couple of weeks in the clinic, and maybe some overfilling and overwhelming moments. But can you share with us your last couple of weeks?
Sure. I also went on a little vacation as well. I was out in California with my sisters. We did a first sister trip in like years. So we actually went out to the Napa Valley region and we spent some time to celebrate my sister's 40th birthday. So that was really fun to get away. But then, of course, I came back and unfortunately figured out that I was going to be short-staffed because my technician who's been doing awesome and crushing it and helping me with scleral lenses had some medical issues come up and had to go on leave. So, I think anybody that's a practice owner, it's like you go on vacation and you already know you're going to come back to a lot. But it's really hard when you come back to like a text at 6 a.m. saying that, I have to resign starting today. So it was a little crazy. So tough being my own tech and doctor. And then this past week, I also had my optician was pre-scheduled off for vacation. So this past week, I was my own tech, doctor, and optician in August. And it was pretty wild. But we survived it. And we actually revenued like 2.5 times what we did last year. I don't know. My one remaining staff member, she was just like, see, we could totally do this with 2 people. And I'm like, I would probably die. Don't recommend it. But
Yeah.
we made it. So luckily, I have another staff member hired. They're just waiting to start in the next week or so to jumpstart. But then you really start to realize how much you depend on your staff once you have them.
Especially good ones. Oh,
Yeah.
you just
I was going to say, it sounds like you owe your one remaining staff member a little dinner or some kind of a bonus or something for this week.
She's actually at her 2-year this month, and she's one of my like OGs. So she opened the office with me 2 years ago. So she's been there through like the ups and downs, and you know, we just make it happen, right? So I know I'm very curious. That's something that we want to talk about is, you know, how do we appreciate, you know, awesome staff members that step up to the plate, even when it's not their trained position, even when it's hard. How do you appreciate those loyal people, and how do you work with your staff? But before we get into that, I do have a question for you guys too. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into Brooke's Overfilled. But my question, as an aside, so more contact lens related, I recently saw my nephew, who's been in Ortho-K for 3 years. Okay. He is 11 years old. I started him in Ortho-K when he was 8. My family history is really, really high myopia. So myself, I'm around like a 7, 8-ish. Okay. My sister is a 20 or was a 20. She recently had an ICL procedure, which was life-changing. And so her son obviously started developing myopia at 7. He went from basically a less than a -1 to a -175 in a year on atropine. So I switched him into Ortho-K at 8. And recently I had him here. We had to wash out of his lenses because he was having some issues. And he's already popped up to about a 4.25. So my question to you, it's been 3 years, ages 8 to 11, and he's progressed 2 diopters. So he's in Ortho-K. What do you think, Brooke and Jason? Should I put him on, you know, combo with atropine? I don't know. Like, he's doing really well with Ortho-K. Otherwise, he loves it.
yeah, like they all do.
He doesn't want to do soft lenses. I've had him, you know, I have him try it right now for like the last week, and it's not a fan. But how do you stop these like genetic trains from growing off the track, right? Because we already know he's going to progress. Any suggestions that you have to help control it a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, so like we were talking about before we came on the air, you know, your sister's -20. So even though this looks like, wow, this treatment's not doing anything to slow this train down, you don't know that, you know. Like I said, we saw somebody, or I consulted with somebody from our peds department this week who saw somebody who was 12 or 13 who's a -11. And so he could be a -8 if you hadn't intervened. We don't know.
Yeah.
So you don't want to assume that what you've done is nothing. You may have reduced the change by 50%, which is significant, because again, he could have ended up a -15, and you're going to hold him down to a -7 or 8. That's a huge difference. You know?
Risk. Yeah.
So you just don't know that what you're doing isn't being beneficial. I absolutely think, you know, atropine in combination with Ortho-K is the way to go with anybody who's at higher risk. And so I would definitely throw him on that. And then, you know, reiterate all the other stuff, right? How much time is he spending outdoors? How much physical activity is he involved with? Blah, blah, blah. Make sure you're doing all the peripherals that aren't related specifically to his eyes, but to his activity level. Make sure those things are getting done too.
Yeah, he does spend a lot of time outside, like every day, with all his friends riding and doing Facebook. And I know. When you do combo therapy, do you usually just jump to like 0.025, or what do you start at for combo with Ortho-K typically?
I think in his case, I mean, is there any reason to not jump up, you know, to the 0.05 or that kind of thing? You know, most of the data is around Ortho-K plus 0.01%. But with his genetics and his like perseverance of his myopia through his ortho K lenses, why would you not full court press as long as he can tolerate it? And when I elect combo therapy nowadays, that especially when parents are high myopes, that's kind of what I decide. And then I pull back on the atropine if there's visual issues, rather than working my way up and proving that the other stuff doesn't work. Because at least where we get atropine from, it's like the same price.
Mhm.
And so I guess other than, the data showing us the difference between, is 0.01 better than 0.05. Other than that, why would I, there's lack of data between those two things, but the stronger concentration seems better on its own.
Mhm.
I mean, a couple other thoughts. One is if he looks like you and your family, is he, fair-haired, fair-eyed, all that, maybe 0.05 is going to be a little strong for him if he is lighter colored eyes. The other part of it too is he's 11. And so, as you get up, at age 6, 7, 8, I'm definitely looking at 0.05. 11 years old,
That's
maybe
true.
I'm thinking 0.025 only at this point, just because you are already doing ortho K.
It's slow
And
down.
he's getting a little older where his vision demands are going to be increasing. But again, you could try the 0.05 and just see how he does.
Yeah.
But I think either one of them is better than nothing, of course. I wouldn't do 0.01 at this point. I think
Yeah.
until you demonstrate, again, that he can't tolerate one of the other stronger concentrations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting that I like to use is, there are some published papers out there that show, hey, here's how emmetropes progress, because they still grow too. And then here's how progressive myopes or untreated myopes progress. And I like to see where I'm at. Like, am I at least, especially on these like very persistent, progressive myopes, like, am I approaching the emmetropic type growth? And then I at least know that I'm probably intervening, and that the likelihood of them completely halting is probably not realistic.
Yeah.
So that's, again, for these higher myopes, we want to stop everything we can, and no change is ideal, but it's probably not realistic, especially again with the strong family history.
One other thing to think about too is ultimately this isn't about his degree of myopia, right? This is about his axial length.
Mhm.
And I don't know, are you able to measure axial length? Are you doing that?
I have baseline from my other office.
Okay.
I don't have a current one from here.
But you know what his Ks are because you just did a washout, right?
Yeah. You can kind of calculate it backwards.
Well, it's okay. Yeah, you can do that. So again, if his Ks are a little bit on the steeper side, if he's a 45 diopter cornea, then you have much less urgency than if he's a 41.
Yeah.
So you need to think about that too and say just how steep are his corneas versus how long is his axial length. If he's got a flat cornea and a long eye already, then I'm more interested in slowing it. I might do the 0.05 again rather than if he's a 46 cornea and his axial length isn't really that long yet, maybe I'm inclined to use a lower. I think it all factors in, right?
Right. Yeah, he is on the flatter side. Interestingly enough, though, my sister was on the steeper, like a 48. Her axial length was still very long when they measured her for ICL. But I mean, it helped that she had a really steep cornea.
Yeah.
But all things that you think about, and it's harder when it's your own family.
You're like so hard.
We want to do like the best that we possibly can. But I'm just happy that he has this option because we didn't have this when we were younger. So honestly, if you can keep him to even mine prescription, that would be better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you for all of your feedback and tips.
Sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. So what overfilled you, Brooke, before we jump into our staff discussion?
I think in general, our resident has now been with us for a month, and it's just really exciting to see those like first experiences all over again. And I know I mentioned that like after her first week, but when you get used to your outgoing resident, just like such good, like all of their questions are more like, in theory, like, what do you think about this? And then going back to those, like, is this patient even a candidate for XYZ technology? And but just to see like the continued growth and like the melding of the team around the new resident, it's just a really fun process that has gone really well over this last month. So I like really couldn't be happier with just that whole process. Like our team has totally just like, taken her in, and it's been just really fun. So I've gotten a lot out of that. And we've had, we've had to add Tuesdays is like my contact lens load day, because in the type of practice that I'm at now, I don't have like quite the volume, but it's definitely growing to the point where, contact lens, we tried to get most everything on Tuesdays and then kind of roll into Wednesdays, but now I'm rolling back into Mondays too. And my fits are always scheduled every week for new patients. So this week was kind of one of those, like I was just kind of reviewing the numbers for my last previous resident and sort of looking at like our volume. And so it was kind of just a rewarding week in general without any like major specific events, but it's been just to see the trends over the last like year and a half is really rewarding to see how far we've come in our growth and getting back to that, lots of contact lens patients and that kind of thing. Because coming from, the old practice in Minneapolis where it was like all day, every day, and then going to just like a few a week, you're like, and now getting back to that where I feel like I'm in a really good balance where I can take really good care of the patients I have, get their lenses ordered, not get too overwhelmed with all the things that go along with keeping these patients moving through their process. And then still having the exposure to some of the other things that I really wanted. Like I wanted to stay sharp in glaucoma, and I wanted to learn more about, corneal procedures and other things. And so I feel like it's just a really good balance right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna before we jump into staff, I got one little thing I just wanted to say. I forgot about this, but when we're talking about Overfilled this week. So in the last couple weeks, I've had 3 patients come in to pick up new lenses. Okay. These were all refits and all having issues with the ability to wear their lenses as long as they wanted to. Okay. And I know we talked this week in some of our text messages about this diameter thing, but every single one of them was just in the wrong diameter lens for their eye. And the minute we put them in an appropriate diameter, they all immediately were like, holy cow, this thing is so much better than what I had. And all we did was put them in the right diameter. And so that was cool to see, again, like I had literally 3 dispenses that were all like one and dones, super happy, like just gushing with how happy they were with their lenses. And all it took was just getting the fit right.
Yeah.
Getting the fit. These weren't like crazy eyeballs that had trauma and blebs and weird stuff. These were normal, moderate keratoconus patients who just by looking at their maps, picking the right lens diameter, adjusting the edges, getting the clearances right, just like that, they're like, I didn't know lenses could feel like this, So we'll talk about that another time too, maybe, because I think we've got some other cases we can talk about that revolve around that. But that was another thing that Overfilled, again, just the opportunity to see the reaction of those patients again as you move them from scleral lens they've been in for a few years already, that they got fitted by somebody else that were fine, but they just weren't quite where they wanted to be. And it was really just a matter of going back into the basics and saying, well, their cornea is this. Why are they in this lens? Let's put them in this one instead, and bingo. So anyway.
Do you think the most common is too small to larger, or did you have both?
Yeah, I 2 of them were too small to larger. One of them was just probably maybe a little too large, so their limbus was just way over vaulted.
Yeah.
Way too much space out there. So, but the other 2 were both in lenses that were just too small. Yeah.
And that's the value of
crunching in on their limbus a little bit.
Yeah, getting comfortable with the differences in sizing and what that looks like on eye. And, there's definitely value in having that range of comfort. I remember when I was a resident, I fit everybody in 18.2 Jupiter. That's just the way it was. And then found somebody who didn't work, and you had to like put the 15.6 on Jupiter. And that was like, oh, I don't like how this looks. But then all of us, you just have to force yourself to kind of step outside that comfort zone. But anyway, that is a great topic for another one on, diameter discussions, because it is a big deal in that primary comfort aspect for patients.
Yep.
We should do that one next week, because I had a similar one as well, but I won't spoil it. Let's put this together for next week, because that's a really good topic that I love talking about too.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about staff support team. Jamie, you're on the thin side this week, but like you said, it sounds like your OG employee really stepped up, and she even did some scleral class, some training for you. And that's so hard when you have a patient, you have other patients waiting, and then they need training. It's like, ooh, like that is one thing that you have to have in practice is somebody who can teach insertion removal and care and handling.
I think that's like the number one thing that I train all of my employees on, because that is the worst time suck for a doctor to sit there and do INR training.
Yeah.
Because it can take a long time and you can get really backed up. And that's something that, you can teach anybody.
Yep.
Sit there, like even if you start the class, you can get it started and go over the basics and then have one of your staff members sit with them and just kind of coach them at that point. That whenever I hear doctors say they do their own INR, I'm like, please just delegate that. And then it empowers the employee that they're like, wow, I helped them. And like, they're so excited that the patient, was successful and they bond with them. And I think it's really rewarding. So that's always like number one, delegating. Everybody in the office, my small office needs to know how to do it. But definitely have a staff member knowing INR is huge.
And it gives the patient another point person too, that they don't always have to call and ask for the doctor to answer a question. They can then ask for technician, like I have kind of like 4 core people that sort of revolve around contact lenses. And it's so nice that it's like, oh, I know this patient when a call comes through, like I will call this patient and at least triage the question and answer what they can. So it's definitely, it's helpful for the patient to have another person who knows what's going on. So I agree, like INR training with a technician is so important. And the other thing that's helpful too is I like to have my lenses settle, for 10, 15 minutes before I go in and see the patient. So I have a tech who does that for me too. So patient comes in, do the entrance testing vision, and then they put the lenses on, and then we have our EHR kind of times how long the patient's been in the room. So they just flip the status to contact lens settling. And so then I can watch.
Oh, nice.
Depending on who the patient is, sometimes I can go in right at 10. Sometimes the patient maybe needs like 15 or more, but it allows me to kind of see, okay, patient has lens on, and then I can go in and if you don't have an EHR that does that, there's still ways to do it where your technician can like put a sticky note on the door, like lenses on at 10:15, and then you can keep an eye on that. And it's, even if you have a technician that can do like a preliminary over refraction too, even if it's just like a spherical over refraction, sometimes my techs will do that. If they put it on and they're like 20/50 and you're not expecting that type of acuity, they'll just do a quick spherical over refraction and see if they can get them any better. And if they can't, then they'll maybe check for bubbles or those kind of things. So just some early troubleshooting so that you don't come in and you're like, oh, you can't see because there's a gigantic bubble through this lens. Mates know that too, or my team. And so being able to have them like, again, and it just like elevates the technician in the eyes of the patient as well. Like, oh, the technician found that I had a bubble. So then they, took it out, put it back in. Those are great ways to utilize a team member and keep the process moving for both you as the provider and the patient visit too. It keeps the patient moving along for their day.
I definitely think scleral lenses lend themselves to more tech involvement than other types of lenses because we are using elevation data and microns of space between lens and eye. Those things are measurable. This isn't like GPs where you have to interpret a fluorescein pattern. This can be measured with an OCT. And so if you, again, I'm not saying that everybody's going to do this, but I've always said that if you had a scleral topographer of some type and an OCT, you could have your technician do the entire fitting process and you could just walk in at the end, double check the edges, double check the over refraction, and you're done. Because the scleral topographer will tell you your initial diagnostic lens to put on. And then the technician can do an OCT and measure the vault. And you can just have a rule of thumb that says, if it's between this and this, we're good. If it's below this or above that, put on the next lens. And then, give it 10 minutes, auto refract them, and then do a subjective if they can. And you can just walk in at the end and just look at the edges and order it up. So I think that, again, as compared to a lot of other types of lenses where there's a little bit more on-eye evaluation that needs to happen, I think you can do scleral lenses far more by like a cookie cutter approach.
That's the dream, Jason. That would be I can't. I have all those things though, and so hopefully, like in the future, I can definitely get there. I mean, it was even helpful for me to have my technician ordering my lenses
Mhm.
because I will have like 8 lenses that need to be ordered, and just me being on the phone, even just because I have the parameters already ready, right? It's not
Yeah.
like that alone would take like I feel like a half hour or more.
Well,
So
and the problem too is, and because I know there are docs out there that order their own lenses, and to everybody who does that, I got to tell you, stop doing that. Okay, it's crazy.
It's such a
Because
waste of time. I mean, granted, there are times you have to talk to the consultant, but for when you know what you need to have,
sometimes you do.
delegate it.
But because if you have done your charting well enough, your chart, you should have written all the parameters that you want to order in that chart.
Mhm.
And so then your tech can read that just as well as you can.
Yep.
If you have to, the problem I notice and what I've seen in practices where I've visited and things like that, and even where we are now, where I have other doctors who work in our service, is a lot of times they will call and order the lenses and they won't put in the chart what they ordered.
Yeah.
Because they just do it. They just look at the chart and they'll talk to the consultant and decide over the phone what they want. And then it never gets put in the chart.
Mhm.
And so then if somebody else has to see that patient next for some reason, I don't know what you were thinking. I don't know what your order is. So my approach has always been, if I'm doing a good enough job charting, my technician should be able to order just as well as me. And so I make sure my order is flawless in the chart. And so then it's like, all right, order the lens, and it's everything they need is right there.
It's life-changing. I also like to have I love having my invoices like scanned in under the files too.
Yes.
Just because sometimes the lens will come in and it's something's not right, and it's because somebody fat fingered 2 digits and all of a sudden the wrong lens got ordered. And then it's sent to you. I love just having that where I can just click and look at it to verify from my chart.
Well, and when a patient comes in with their lenses switched,
yes.
Yep.
and you read the number on the lens, you're like, okay, this isn't the most recent order. If you have them all scanned in, like you said,
Yeah.
you can go back through your orders and find it in the chart without having to tell your staff to pull up all the old orders from 4 years ago.
Right.
I agree. I think that was one thing when I first got to this position I'm in now, we did not do that. And I insisted, no, every invoice has to be scanned into the chart.
Mhm.
Because it's critical. And so I agree with you. That's another thing that staff can do is make sure your charts are properly, filled with the right information that you need.
Yeah, and we'll have I am spoiled in that I had a scribe with me in the exam room. So for those of you who have a scribe, what Katie does is she has the invoice printed out. So my team, we scan it into the EHR, so it's always there. But they also print it out for me so that I like to make my notes on it so that I can quickly reference it.
That's awesome.
And so I'll ask Katie, like, what's my horizontal landing? And she'll say, oh, it's Steve 2. And I'll be like, okay, Steve 5, or whatever. And then I'll kind of, as I'm looking at the patient, I'm like telling her what I want. So she'll either write it on the invoice or, in the chart as well, of course. And then she's got an email, like as I'm talking, email to the lab rolling. And then she like shows it to me when I'm done looking at the patient. And then I just look it over and, sometimes I'll like add a thing and then boom, she hits send as we walk out the door. So that's on, again, it's not every patient that we can do that, but on the ones that I can, we can do that. And it really helps with just sitting down at the end of the day. And then I only need to focus on the ones that are, my quad specific, real fancy kind of stuff. And it really helps take that efficiency up. And I also love being able to tell patients like, yes, you can schedule your appointment in 2 weeks. Like you can confidently say the lens is going to be here because I've already ordered it.
Right.
Some of these
I was
other
going to say that.
like, wait till we call you because I might need a day or 2 or 3 days to even get to this order and spend 20 minutes talking to consulting. So it's just so nice knowing that you're not wasting the patient warranty time either. And that's, again, like technicians and scribes, Brittany, Katie, Kendra, Annie, thank you. They're just such a big part of this.
I agree. I love being able to tell the patient before they leave that their lens is ordered.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, I've just put in your order and it should be here in 10 to 14 days. And then they know it's ordered. Yeah. And like you said, sometimes and it doesn't always work out where you get it ordered. Sometimes it doesn't happen for whatever reason. It's like, all right, I'll have to order this one later. But then, how often does that sit on your desk for 2 or 3 days before you get to it?
It's hard. It can
Yeah.
happen.
And so it's just, I think, again, what it costs you to employ a person for a day of work and what you can get for that $300 worth of time, investment or whatever you pay them for that day. I mean, it's just the increased efficiency and the increased, quality of work that you can do. I think that too many people try to get by too cheap on staff. And I think that's not a good place to be cutting corners.
It's true. Because when I was short, it's like it spills over to everything else. Like I'm staying late doing office stuff. And for those of you that, know conference season is coming up, which is the fall. And so you know what that means is the writing
deadlines.
Writing season is right now. Okay. And so I have all these writing deadlines that I was planning on working on after, but then I end up staying 2 hours late to finish everything at the office because I'm short staffed. And then I'm like extra late on my writing. So it just like spills over into your life. And so I'm just like, I'm so happy that in 2 weeks, I'm going to be fully back, fully staffed. I'm like, that's the best money you can ever spend.
Yeah.
You spend more time with your family and you're less stressed while you're at the office, and you can give better care to your patients. And so I just can't wait. But one of our call to actions is actually, we want to give shout outs to our all-star rock star staff. So if you have a rock star and you want to give them a shout out, we'll share your little video. We can either share it on social media or maybe put it on the podcast. If you have someone that's amazing, give them a little video shout out. We'll give them a shout out. I'll give my shout out right now to my OG Mary for staying with me while it was crazy last week. She just, rose to the occasion. And so thanks for sticking with me for the past 2 years throughout the cold start. Do you want to give a shout out to anyone, Brooke? I know you already did a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Katie's my scribe. Brittany is my lead contact lens tech. And then Kendra and Annie are the technicians that sort of support the overflow of contact lens stuff. So they help with like mailing, calling, scheduling patients. So just so grateful for all of them keeping the service rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And for me, it's Brandy. She's the one who knows how to do all my instruments, does all my scleral maps for me, does all the lens ordering for me. And yeah, I don't know what I would do without her. So
I was gonna say, what do you do, Jason?
Yeah. I mean, I just, I tell the students what to put in the chart, and then Brandy orders, and
he just spreads the knowledge.
That's the dream.
That's right. That's the way it should be, right?
That's the dream.
Make the most of our time.
That is the dream.
So awesome. Well, good chat today, everyone, and hope to get some feedback from those of you listening on how you utilize your team and how much you love them, and can't wait to see those shout outs. And,
I'd love to know if people have other ways they use their staff that they found to be really helpful that they would like to share with the rest of us to get good ideas.
Yeah. So another call to action, if you have a great use of a team member that we didn't mention here, share it so the rest of us can be more efficient at our workplace. And then another call to action too, if you have a great way that you reward your staff, that's a little bit outside the box, because it's not just, here's a bonus. I like to do stuff that's a little bit different than just money, So what's a fun way that you can reward your team members and thank them for their hard work? So if you have any great ideas or pearls for that, we're happy to hear them.
Yeah, Brooke knows what we used to do in our practice. Once a quarter, we got together for dinner at someone's house and
had a little
played
party.
games and just had a good time. So we used to do that quarterly. We would invite the students who were there for that rotation along with the staff, and all of us would get together, and we did that every 3 months at the new rotation of new students. So
it was really fun.
And that was a bonding time. We created a lot of memories with our staff during those dinners.
Yep, definitely such a great connection. So
oh, that's fun, like a little family dinner.
It was definitely, yeah. So cool. Well, with that, keep fitting and overfilling, and we'll see everyone next week.
Have a good week.
Bye.